Hey guys, welcome to Hip Hughes History. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm Johnny Cash because I'm about to walk the line on the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare. We're going to do kind of a sketchy history of healthcare reform and then look at kind of maybe 8 critical aspects of Obamacare, and then wherever you fall on the fence of ideology, you can leave it down in the comments below. So middle school, high school, college, cray-cray on the internet, we're about to grow your brain. So sit back and strap in, because giddy up, the learning's here. Certainly healthcare reform, you could make 15 videos on healthcare reform, and really we can go back to Teddy Roosevelt to find the first president that's talking about the idea of kind of universal healthcare or healthcare reform. It becomes part of Harry Truman's kind of platform plank in 1948 for the Democratic Party, the concept of universal healthcare. And then in the 1960s you have major reforms like Medicare and Medicaid, which are basically kind of socialism kind of programs that are guaranteeing some type of insurance cover for the very poor, Medicaid, and for the elderly, Medicare. But even with those two programs covering kind of the most vulnerable aspects of our population, by the 21st century, the United States still had 48 million Americans that had no health insurance. So people that are very, very far on the right would argue that free market capitalism is the best approach, and allowing kind of pure competition would drive down costs, and that would allow more people to be able to afford to buy health insurance. And if you're way, way on the left, you kind of have the notion of kind of like health care is a guarantee, that it's not a responsibility, it's a right as a human being. Therefore, the government, through the people's representation, should kind of have a system where everybody has free access, and of course that means that that's going to be tax money that's going to pay for that. And certainly if you're looking at kind of like organization of governmental concepts, the philosophy of the United States is founded on the idea of kind of protection of personal liberty and property. So many Americans on the right see this as kind of thievery, and people on the left see it as ethical and empathetic and the right thing to do. So where is Obamacare? It's probably somewhere more in the middle, to be honest with you. But let's take a look at kind of the 8 most important aspects of Obamacare, and then you can duke it out. I like the duking out. So let's talk about kind of the fun part first, the part that I think everybody likes. There's really kind of 3 insurance standards that Obamacare is going to mandate. One of them is going to be that young people can stay on their parents' insurance to the age of 25. So that's going to cover, you know, a good 2 million Americans that didn't have health insurance before. The second is that health insurance companies are no longer going to be able to drop people that get sick, because obviously that's a risk and it's going to be really costly for the insurance companies to keep that person on. So many instances, insurance companies would find ways to drop that person. And then the third thing is that pre-existing conditions will no longer stop somebody from being able to access an insurance policy for the same cost of somebody that doesn't have a pre-existing condition. So these 3 kind of industry standards are going to cost the insurance companies, the private insurance companies, a whole lot of money. So somewhere we're going to have to make that money up for insurance companies. So let's look at kind of the second major reform under Obamacare, right? Insurance standards, what's next? So the second part, I think people like too. And the second part is basically the idea of essential benefits that, for instance, if you get a colonoscopy, or you get a breast mammogram, or you want to get birth control, or you want to have a wellness visit, that you're not going to have co-pays anymore. That basically the concept is that if you want a healthier America, you don't want to put barriers up for kind of people that are at the risk end of things, of not going get that mammogram or not covering their birth control and kind of risking it, because in the end that's going to cost more money. So this is kind of seen as a cost-saving measure, but at the same time insurance companies are, again, they're losing money because they have to provide these services without the copay anymore. And then there's also used to be limits or caps on certain things. So if you got chemotherapy or if you had long-term care, that the insurance policies would basically say after so many times paying out, we're going to stop, we're going to cap that. And basically what Obamacare does is remove those caps. So if you have long-term care or you have some type of disease where you're getting the same treatment over and over and over again, the insurance companies are going to have to pay out. So as you can see from the first two parts, people win, insurance companies lose, right? So let's keep going with kind of the third kind of major item under Obamacare. Okay, it's time to pay. It's time for the insurance companies to cash in. Because what you have to remember is that, like, people on the left really want kind of like governmental insurance, and people on the right kind of want a pure free market system. Obamacare really is more of a private market system, although you're going to have government regulations that certainly people on the right have, legitimate claims against, and you're going to have government control in a certain way because you're kind of mandating things. Private insurers are still in the realm of control in the sense of they're the ones that are covering the policies. So what do they want? If you're an insurance company and now you're taking sick people and you're taking, people with pre-existing conditions and you have to kind of pay out more, what do you want? You want healthy people. And that's kind of the rub. The rub is the individual mandate. And the individual mandate basically is a very new concept. The government's never really made people buy something before. If you get a car insurance, that's mandated, right? But first you have to decide to buy a car. Then you have to get the car insurance. So the idea of being born in America and the government says, all right, you have to go buy your bag of potatoes, is really kind of a foreign concept, and I think that it smacks in the face a little bit of kind of American liberty and protection from tyranny. But for health insurance reform to work, the individual mandate has to be there, because what that's going to say is that if you don't have health insurance, you have to get health insurance, not from the government, but from one of these private insurers. So cha-ching! Now they have that extra revenue because that's a good bet to take healthy people on. That's a good bet because you're probably not going to have to pay out. So people that never had health insurance are now in your pool. You have an expanded pool, which allows you to cover more riskier people. That's kind of the compromise that the insurance companies went for. So what if you don't get health insurance? Well, first, if you can't afford it, there's going to be subsidies. And again, that's going to be kind of the concept that someone's got to pay. So if you're a person that's maybe above the Medicaid line, let's say you have a family of 4, you're making $40,000 a year, it's really expensive, you can't afford the insurance, the government's going to pay a portion of that depending on your salary. So of course that money has to come from somewhere. Thank you, rich person. And that's kind of the concept that the people on the right are, not too thrilled with. But moving on from there, the concept of the individual mandate would say that if you're healthy and you can afford it, we no longer want to take you on as a risk as the American people, because remember, if you're healthy, let's say you're making $70,000 a year and you're like, I don't need health insurance, I'm going to live forever, boom! And a bus hits you. What's going to happen, right? You're going to go to the hospital, you're going to get long-term care, you're going to have your face implanted or something like that. It's going to cost like $1 billion, and you're not going to pay, and my premium's going to pay. So people that are kind of for the individual mandate used to kind of believe that this was a responsibility that people had. So if you look at the history of healthcare reform, the individual mandate actually is born on the right. It's born from the Heritage Foundation. It was part of the competing plans with Bill Clinton back in the early 90s. But many Republicans opposed it and changed their minds, I guess, because it's the idea that you're making somebody buy something that they necessarily don't have to buy or want to buy. But again, in order for health insurance reform to work, the individual mandate has to be there. So what happens if you don't, pay? What if you're like, I'm not going to buy it? God, you're going to go to jail. No, you're not going to go to jail, but you are going to pay, and this is kind of the rub, a tax, a penalty. So the tax is pretty cheap in the beginning, $75, $100, and then it's on a rising scale. So eventually, in 5 or 10 years, you might have to pay a tax penalty of $1,000 or a couple $1,000 because you're not in the pool driving down costs that allow for people that are sick and unhealthy to be in the pool. Are you confused yet? Because I'm confused. let's look at some more of Obamacare. That's the individual mandate, and that was found to be constitutional in the Supreme Court. So whether you agree with it or disagree with it, you're going to lay it down in the comments, but right now, technically it's constitutional because the Supreme Court said so. Judicial review. Fourth thing I'd like to talk about is the online healthcare exchanges. And the concept behind this is really kind of a shared left-right concept, the idea of competition. I think that most Republican plans have these kind of healthcare online exchanges in their plans, but many of them are state plans, meaning that the state would run the website, which they would probably argue would be more efficient than having a big federal bureaucracy run the website. Because what could go wrong? What could go wrong? Nothing could go wrong. And you see a lot of clunkiness and a lot of problems with contractors. But the idea is that if you have all of these different healthcare plans online and available, then that will drive competition. So the idea is that these healthcare exchanges will bring millions of new people into the healthcare market, and again, getting closer to the idea of universal coverage, which is eventually seen as the ultimate goal, because that's what's going to drive down costs. Because you won't have people getting ER visits and extraordinary care because they're going to be taken care of by going to the doctor when they get the sniffles. I got the sniffles. All right, we're almost done, right? So you got that? Healthcare exchanges. Bang, bang for learning. So the fifth thing I kind of already mentioned, and that's really subsidies. The idea that we're going to subsidize people that can't afford to buy insurance by chipping in so they can get insurance, because the idea is that that's a better investment. Spending the money there to get that person insurance if they can't afford it is actually going to save the taxpayers money, because that person's not a risk. They're not a risk by not having health insurance and then getting hit by that bus and going to the hospital and costing the taxpayers $1 gillion. But of course, a subsidy means somebody's getting a handout, somebody's getting help, somebody that's up here is paying to help somebody down there. And again, this is a left-right ideological kind of thing, and you can argue about that down there again. Here we go! Subsidies! So the sixth part is really an expansion of Medicaid. Medicaid was created in the 1960s to give basic health insurance to America's poor, the underclass, the ones that are making minimum wage, living at the poverty line, that can't afford insurance and would never be able to pay for it. So therefore they're covered, and again, someone's paying for that. And when someone's paying for that, a lot of times there's a lot of corruption, and there's certainly Medicaid corruption and thievery and bureaucracies, and we don't have to talk too long about that. I know you're going to leave it in the comments, but basically what Obamacare does is it expands Medicaid coverage to like 133% of the poverty line. So even if you're a little above the poverty line, that net is going to capture more, I would say, lower middle class Americans that once didn't qualify for Medicaid now can get Medicaid. And basically, I think one of the problems the right has is that the federal government is kind of subsidizing that cost now by giving the states the money to pay for this expanded Medicaid program, but that money eventually trickles out, and I think that they're worried the states are going to be left with this kind of burden or this unfunded mandate. The government saying, do it, now you do the money to do it, and that's going to be a huge burden. But people that are on the left see this as, a necessity to get more people covered to drive costs down, to save taxpayers money in the long run. Are you confused yet? Because I am. We're almost done. Stick a fork in Hugh soon. He's almost done. So the seventh change is to Medicare. And Medicare is of course, for the retired, the elderly, people pay in as they work, and there's subsidies, and the government, kind of creates this program and runs Medicare. And most people that have Medicare like Medicare, but again, people on the right are going to say that it's going to run out of money and that it's a huge burden, and people on the left are going to say that this is the example of universal health care that we need. But either way, what Obamacare does is it stops Medicare really being a user, kind of like a fee service. So, for instance, if I go and I get 18 tests, Medicare is going to pay for 18 tests. And what Obamacare Obamacare does is to kind of encourage innovation and cost-saving measures, says we're going to do output payments, basically saying if you get somebody with diabetes, we're going to give you a pool of money. Spend that money wisely. So instead of getting 18 tests, the doctor is probably going to look and say, well, they really could do maybe 4 tests and get the best results. And of course, people on the right are going to say this is kind of the idea of death panels, that you're going to limit service to people that should get service. And people on the other side are going to say that this is a cost-saving measure. Either way, you're allowed to think whatever you want, but definitely Medicare is going to change the way that Medicare operates. And doctors are going to be thinking more about the idea of, I don't want this patient coming back to me. Because if this patient comes back to me, they're going to cost me money. So the concept being, give them good service and give them the best chance of being healthy so they don't have to come back to the hospital, which means that you're going to get paid. You got it? Medicare reform in terms of how payments are paid. There you go. Giddy up. We're almost done. So the last is the employer mandate. And there probably is a lot of confusion about this, but really the language of Obamacare states that if you're an employer, small businessman, you have more than 50 employees. If your employees don't have health insurance, right, and they're getting subsidized by the federal government, meaning they're not making enough to afford it, so the taxpayers are paying for that person, then you're going to pay a fine. You're going to have a tax put on you. Concept is that if you are a corporation and you're not paying, or a small business, your employees enough so they can afford health insurance, which means that everyone's going to pay their health insurance, then you're going to pay. That's the concept. Now again, all of this, the devil's in the details. All of this is in, the thousands of pages of Obamacare that many people probably are going to point to different parts and the language and interpretations and yada, yada, yada. Not my job, not my job, not my job. What I wanted to do for you guys out there in TV land is at least give you kind of the 8 big chunks of Obamacare. So there you go. I think that was good. It's about 10 minutes. Johnny Cash, walking the line, Obamacare. I feel like if I fall, I'm going to die in a pit of fire. No, a ring of fire. Certainly, guys, if you haven't subscribed, I'd ask you kindly to click right there and you'll step off to the website, the YouTube site of Hip Hughes, and you can subscribe and make me smile. And if you check the description below, we have tons of other EDU channels, some of my friends out there in internet land, that will help your brain keep on growing. Where attention goes, energy flows, guys. It's been certainly fun. We'll see you next time. Ding dong. I'm leaving. Learning's done.